India's External Affairs Minister Dr. Shankar has drawn the line and spelt it out loud and clear that Twitter cannot act as if it is somehow above the law. If it wants to operate in India, all tech companies must comply with local laws, and there is absolutely no other way around it. Here is our lead story.
Big tech is there. It's in my life, very, very visibly in my life. So you have a big presence. Where's the responsibility? Okay, they have huge power. Where's the accountability?
The biggest and the most direct attack on big tech. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Shankar exposed double standards of social media giants at the India Global Forum, raising the debate about accountability with big power that big tech wields and responsibility with their massive presence in our lives.
In a democratic society, we have to ask ourselves, okay, big tech is there. It's in my life, very, very visibly in my life. So you have a big presence. Where's the responsibility which comes with it? Okay, they have huge power. Where's the accountability? This is again not an issue limited to India. They harvest our data as they do across the world. So you have, in a sense, the opposite of the American Revolution, which is you have representation and no taxation.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair raised the issue of the technological revolution of the 21st century being the equivalent of the industrial revolution of the 19th century, where big tech plays a very crucial role in the lives of people. Blair agreed there was a need for a regulatory mechanism within which big tech operates in any democracy.
So if you take the major tech giants, their impact on our lives and on the economy is so enormous that my institute published a paper last year, actually, talking about how you need a regulatory framework within which they operate.
Dr. Shankar exposed the argument that asking big tech to operate in a regulatory mechanism in a democracy amounts to an assault on free speech.
International relations has been devised on the basis of state-based players. What happens when you have non-state players who in some ways are bigger than many states? So these are very serious questions which need debating. I think they can't be brushed under the carpet saying, well, you shouldn't question them because then you're attacking freedom of speech. I think that's a cop-out. It obviously serves their interest. So it's a very, very legitimate debate.
India had in February directed big tech giants to operate in a regulatory mechanism and appoint a grievance redressal officer to respond to grievances of social media users, a nodal officer to interact with government agencies, and a compliance officer to file a monthly compliance report on complaints and action taken. Twitter is yet to appoint the three, despite a week-long grace period given after the May 26 deadline. Union Law and IT Minister Ravi Prasad has accused Twitter of following an arbitrary approach.
You, in Washington, when some people invade the Capitol, you stop their Twitter account, which also involved a president at that point in time. Your decision? But when the Red Fort of Delhi is invaded during the farmers' strike by terrorist supporters with sword-wielding people, Red Fort is where the Prime Minister hoists the national flag. You say it is freedom of speech?
The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology has also given Twitter a 48-hour deadline to explain why Union Law and IT Minister Ravi Prasad's Twitter account was blocked for an hour and directed the micro-blogging platform to comply with Indian IT laws and rules. Bureau Report, India Today.
Twitter has till tomorrow to explain why Union Telecom Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad's Twitter account was locked for more than an hour recently. As of now, there are 4 cases against Twitter's top India boss, and now the National Commission for Women has also swung into action. They've asked Twitter to explain about the posting of some obscene posts on the Twitter platform.
Social media giant Twitter's troubles are mounting. First, it was read the Right Act by the IT minister.
When they said within a week we will do it, they did not do so. If you do not follow these guidelines or the rules, then you will lose Section 79 status and other attendant penal law consequences.
And now, in a fresh flare-up, the Parliamentary Committee for Information and Technology, chaired by Congress MP Shashi Tharoor, has sought a written reply from Twitter within 2 days. This for blocking Minister Ravi Shankar Prasad's account for an hour on Friday. On the same day, Shashi Tharoor claimed his account too was blocked by Twitter earlier. For Twitter, the mounting heat is just the tip of the iceberg. So far, 4 FIRs have been filed against the American microblogging giant over a range of issues. In the national capital, the Delhi Cyber Cell has lodged FIR under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act for children pornographic content shared on its platform by users. In Ghaziabad, FIR is registered for allegedly spreading fake information. UP and Madhya Pradesh police have registered cases for showing a distorted map of India on its platform. The centre says Twitter has lost immunity that other social media firms enjoy for content posted by users, as the company failed to meet the new IT guidelines that came into effect on May 26th. The government says the new IT rules are essential to prevent the misuse of social media.
It deals not with the use of social media, it deals with the abuse and misuse of social media and give a voice to the victims of abuse. Journalists, now judges, forget politicians, small businessmen, people are being defamed, fake news going on, nudity being shown.
Cyber experts too have echoed a similar sentiment.
जो बाउंड्री है हमारी, वो बाउंड्री एक चीज़ के लिए हमारा जो है जवान जाके मरता है. हम कुछ भी जो जंग होती है फिर हम जाके मोमबत्ती लेके इंडिया गेट पहुंच जाते हैं. कोई कानून है ही नहीं, मुझे आज तक दिखा नहीं कोई कानून जो डायरेक्टली इस मुद्दे को, इस बात को टच करे.
With the microblogging site losing its intermediary status and legal shield in India last week, Twitter can legally be held liable for every post made by its millions of users. With Rahul Srivastav and Aishwarya Paliwal in Delhi and Mustafa Sheikh in Mumbai, Bureau Report, India Today.
You know, what happens in this battle of attrition next? Can Twitter really take on the might of the Indian government and Indian public opinion and still continue to survive in the Indian market? Does Twitter have a death wish? Does it want to jeopardize its presence in a market as big as India? Or is Twitter correct in saying that, you know, the Indian government seems to be overreaching, that a lot of this is actually being done with an aim on clamping down on free speech, and they're the crusaders for free speech? Joining me on this broadcast, I want to welcome Arvind Gupta. He's been with the BJP, expert in digital economy, has been former CEO of the government's platform MyGov, has run the BJP's IT cell, understands the internet architecture well. We have Rahul Khurshid. Rahul Khurshid has been with Twitter as its head of news. Now, very safely, he's not getting any FIRs, a smart move, exiting at the right time. He's the co-founder of Laminar Global. For two different kinds of legal perspective, we've got NS Napinai, advocate and founder of the Cyber Sathi Foundation. Kanish Gaur is the founder of the India Future Foundation. I want to go to Rahul first because he's worked with Twitter, understands the dynamics of what could potentially be going on in the minds of the who's who in California. Rahul, what do you think they're thinking when they knock off the map of India in a way that Ladakh is shown as part of China, Jammu and Kashmir is shown as part of Pakistan? I'm wondering what is going on. Is this deliberate slights because they're not happy with the way their executives are being FIR'd across the country? Or do you think this is just happenstance, that lots of awkward things just popping up at the wrong time, making it seem as if there's some grand conspiracy in Menlo Park when actually there isn't, and that this just happens to be one of those things which are all bursting at the same time? What do you think is going on?
I think the later for sure. I don't think there's a conspiracy, so to speak, that Twitter wants to sort of pitch itself against the government of India. I think what is happening is a series of these incidents that have sort of like resulted in the relationship, the formal relationship between the government and the company, sort of like going downhill a little. In context to the map incident, it's happened before. It's often a third party, that where Twitter sources its data from, and there's a variance as to how maps are portrayed, how Indian maps are portrayed within the Indian geographies and how they're portrayed outside of it. And that variance sometimes isn't geofenced. In any case, there's some, like, I don't want to get into the technicality of that, but as far as the specific incident is concerned, I think, again, it's just one of those incidents that just popped up at the wrong place at the wrong time, making it seem like there's a grand conspiracy when there is none.
Because it doesn't really suit Twitter, Arvind Gupta, rationally speaking, to be taking on the Indian government. Forget what they think of the Modi government, because of the sheer size of the Indian market and the utility of having a presence in India against running the risk of potentially getting banned. Do you buy Rahil's theory that this isn't a conspiracy, it's just a lot of quirks, irritating quirks, bursting at the same time, virtually simultaneously, making it seem as if Twitter has its knives out for the Modi government, when in fact it doesn't? Or do you think something sinister?
Rahul, let me start off by saying a few things. Rahil has been at Twitter, and I think it is not that India needs Twitter. It's Twitter needs India. All these companies, all the big tech companies, get their highest user base. They're not allowed to operate in China. The next biggest democratic, or the biggest democratic internet market in the world is India. 75 crore plus users. So all these platforms and the big tech, and your debate is about big tech, including Twitter, really need Indian market. I mean, we are 75 crore users. The biggest platforms, whether it's Google or Facebook or whatever else, they have 50, 60 crore users in India. That's 500 million users globally. So, bulk of their users come from India. So Twitter also needs India to keep up their valuations. If you saw last quarter's results of Twitter or last year's results, they're not a massively profit-making company. In fact, I think they make losses. But one of the biggest concerns analysts have been showing to them is no user growth. And where would user growth come from? From countries like India, from Nigeria, and that's where they have been at odds with. Now, what does the government has asked, not only of Twitter, but everybody
Arvind,
else?
let me say this. You are saying Twitter needs India, which is true. But the fact, let me just pin you down on what you're saying. The fact is that India also is now in some ways addicted to, or very used to, Twitter, including the who's who of the Modi government. Prime Minister Modi himself, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, was one of the pioneers amongst politicians using social media. A lot of the clout of the BJP versus the likes of, say, the Congress or the Trinamool or any of the opposition parties comes from its sheer dominance of these tech platforms.
So the dominance of the tech platforms, and I have been a little part of it, comes not only from just one platform. It's how you use the technology that is evolving now. So suppose a new platform comes up. In 2010, Orkut was very dominant. Today, Orkut you don't even hear about. So, platforms change. It's in your DNA, how you adopt those platforms and how do you execute your communication strategy and your outreach strategy on it. Platform actually at the end of the day becomes irrelevant. I don't think so. This is about Indian governments or Indians as consumers, all of us, bipartisan dependence on Twitter. Twitter will be arrogant to think that we need Twitter. Twitter can be replaced very, very fast, and it has been. All technologies have been replaced if they have not.
No, but you're trying. For example, you've tried to push Coup Coup was positioned as the Atmanirbhar app, it hasn't really taken off. I mean, yes, we know that some posts are now happening on Coup.
I mean, I am not a spokesperson.
But if you ask anybody watching this broadcast,
see, this is how startups take on the giants slowly and slowly. And I don't need to preach how, a small company that point in time, 20 years ago, Google took on the Alta Vistas of the world and the Yahoos. And today Yahoo doesn't exist and Google does. And Google is one of the most valuable companies. Alphabet is the most valuable company in the world. So 9 out of the 10 top companies in the world today are tech companies. So time has shrunk in the internet world. Time has shrunk, and if we feel somehow, and I'll give you 2 examples, Rahul. I mean, we thought India couldn't live without TikTok. Just around this time, actually on this date last year, India banned the Chinese apps, including TikTok. And there was a lot of hue and cry, including on your channel, where people said, "Oh, creators, people, TikTok gone. What will we do? What will happen now?" Look at what has happened. I mean, you've got tons of Indian replacements. You've got a lot of US-based products. Everybody is doing well. It is arrogance of any platform to think that they can take the market for granted. That's hubris. And I continue to say that it will apply to big tech.
Rahul, Khurshid, do you agree that we can just like do to Twitter what Nigeria did to Twitter, say takliya and off with your head and we don't want you? Is that possible? Would there be a huge backlash?
No,
Arvind is correct when he says that TikTok also was hugely addictive, but after a while people just got used to different kinds of alternatives. So Coup may not be huge right now, but if there is no Twitter, then it is possible that people will gravitate towards apps like Coup, because there is no Twitter and that conversation kind of goes on. So something else will come, as has been the case with TikTok. We're doing fine with that without TikTok. Now, the counter argument could potentially be, Arvind's not on TikTok, or I imagine that he isn't and won't care very much. He's on Twitter. Would people as happily, the Twitterati, would they happily gravitate to another app? Rahul.
Rahul, there are 2 aspects to this question. The first one is that I completely agree with Arvind when he says that technology evolves and people move to newer platforms, but that process has to be organic. It can't be mediated by the state, because again, from the very beginning, the conversation needs to be had from the point of view of the users, not from the point of view of the platforms or from the point of view of the government, because the platforms are in it for the money. And the government is in it in this conversation for the control. Unfortunately, the user is the one who gets left behind. Even you look at TikTok as well, right? There was a whole host of creators that had found their voice, which had not been able to break through into any of the other platforms because of literacy reasons and so on. And TikTok was that platform where they were, you were beginning to really truly transformatively see content from rural India. All of that has disappeared. All of those creators have disappeared. And that's never a good thing for free expression. The debate needs to be had in those terms. Unfortunately, at this stage, Twitter is being cast as, this martyr of free speech, which it is not. It's a big tech company trying to do its business in India. It has run into issues with the government of India that it needs to resolve sitting on a table. In context to how the company needs to behave in terms of how it needs to be regulated, not just in India, in global context too, that conversation needs to be a very, very serious one, and that needs to be a civil society-led conversation. The government has its own interests at the heart of this conversation.
Kanish, this is correct. One, of course, is that the Indian government has its own interests. All governments have their own interests. Okay.
Absolutely. That's not the laws. The UPA government passed a really bad set of laws to control social media. The BJP government has unfortunately made those laws worse. And in the process, the Indian user, the internet user, is the one who suffers. And that's the point of view that's often missing from these debates. That's my limited point.
Okay. Kanish Gaur, Twitter seems to be acting like a rebellious teenager. That I don't want to listen to my parents. The government's acting like a parent trying to tell me what to do, what not to do. I'm my own person. This is Woodstock and we do what we want. It's wild and we can do whatever we want. Now, that's not really, even if you support free speech, the right approach, because as was the case with Donald Trump's account being barred, and we saw people like Angela Merkel, who's a very sensible centrist politician, coming out and saying she's uncomfortable with that decision being taken by a tech company. If it's a decision mandated by law enforcement or by courts, it's a different matter. For a tech company to be taking a decision like that is dangerous. What do you make of this battle between Twitter and the Indian government, and the manner in which Twitter has been acting in comparison with how Facebook or Google are acting?
So, Rahul, it's very important for us to understand that these tech giants, whatever they are today, have been created by these governments, not only Indian government, but I would say US government. And they have been used, and today they are being thrown behind, because the elections are over, right? Things have changed. Every political leader, domestic or international, is on Twitter today, and they have huge fan following. Today, when certain things come late, you give them limited time to follow a specific law. These platforms, specifically Twitter, is being labeled as being a mischievous child or being told that they are not following the guidelines. But you need to realize that these companies also have built up big tech. They have built up artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms. They have built up a huge database. All of that adaptation does not happen in 3 months. That needs time, right? Today, India has such a massive population. If you've got 50 crore users for whom you need to maintain data and also track every text message, and you have the entire team working from home, which company will be able to build this technology over a period of 3 months? This is a big issue.
No. One second. Kanish, one second. No, one second. Twitter was given more than 3 months to appoint grievance officials. They were told the kind of grievance officials that were required. Now, this whole business that we haven't been able to find someone, that's bogus. If there's a position out in any company, no matter how complicated and elaborate your interview processes are, Twitter had more than enough time to fill up these positions, as other companies have been able to do. To come back and say we haven't been able to do it, then you're really running a very bad shop. You're a very poorly governed and managed company.
Rahul, let me correct you here. All the companies, so Twitter had a officer appointed who resigned. They had appointed an officer who resigned. All the other companies don't have people from their own.
Yeah, you had to appoint 3, you appointed 1.
No, so the positions are still out today. But with criminal liability on these employees, FIR being filed against the company MD, right? How many people will come and join Twitter? Or forget Twitter, the other companies which are there. It's very difficult to close these roles, right? You look at the today's scenario, there would be people in Twitter who will be under tremendous amount of stress and pressure. That also has to be looked in. Another important
Rahul,
aspect that you need to realize.
Do you buy that, Arvind Gupta? This argument, no, one second. There is some merit to the argument that if you know that tumhara gala hi katne wala hai, that you're being given this job where ultimately there'll be FIRs and you'll be going from Bulandshahr to Ghaziabad and where have you, where cases are lodged. You really need to be a very daring or adventurous person to say, yes, I want to sign up for it, no matter how much money, dollar denominated in compensation, Twitter is willing to pay. So that is to some extent correct. Rahul, when Kanish makes the point that you won't really have people jumping out with joy saying that they want to sign up.
See, Rahul, there is 2 issues. If you, first of all, Twitter is in a self-inflicted wound situation. All it had to do is designate, not hire new people. They have a lot of team in India. Unless Kanishk is suggesting they have 0 people in India. They have a team in India. And within that team, they needed to appoint 3 officers and name 3 officers, designate them as nodal compliance and grievance officers. They chose not to do that. And they chose not to engage with the government. It's not the government which has gone after Twitter. Let me be very, very clear here. It is Twitter which has decided on its own to be this, this free speech champion, to say, oh, I won't comply, India. And, I operate under my own rules and policies. And it's been doing that. It's been operating with impunity on its own rules and policies. It's been locking the IT minister's account, and it has time to do all of that. It has time to, de-verify a lot of accounts and a lot of other things, but it does not have time to name and designate 3 officers as required by the law.
I'm very curious to know, Rahul Khurshid, can Ravi Shankar Prasad's account get locked just accidentally for something that happened in 2017? You understand how Twitter works. you've seen it from the inside. How would this typically happen? Can this just happen as one of those things that happened for a complaint which was about 4 years old? Or do you think that someone deliberately, because they are peeved or irked with the fact that their local officials are having all these FIRs against them, and therefore they wanted to poke Ravi Shankar Prasad back in the eye?
No, why would anyone want to do that, particularly in a charge context? Quite obviously, it is someone, it's a DCMA complaint, and it was filed by Sony India for a piece of music that was attached to a tweet by the minister. Someone got to it. Again, as I said, like from my understanding,
but 4 years ago, if you're a tech company, one second, sir, this is not a local court or a district court.
No,
how has it taken 4 years for Twitter to act on it?
From my point of view, I don't think anyone is going into a file cabinet, a dark file cabinet, and picking out files to see what they can act on and what they can't act on.
Rahul, Twitter has a history. Rahul, Twitter had a history of social such actions by their employees in the past. And I think I don't want to make this only about what actions Twitter has done. But Twitter has had a lot of issues with its, social engineering within its employees, the biases that the employees have, which get transferred into the, into the biases that the algorithms have. And that's the overall issue with Twitter.
I want to go across to NS Napinai, who's listening in. Now, the point that Kanish Gaur makes is that who would want to sign up? That given, and to some extent it's true, it's out in the public domain, whoever wants to come as a grievance or compliance officer knows that from Ghaziabad to Bulandshahr there'll be all manner of complaints. You'll have to go appear in person, then try and file caveats against appearance, and therefore it's not as if Twitter hasn't tried, they haven't succeeded because they aren't getting the right candidate. Do you buy that at all?
Not at all, Rahul. Thank you for finally reaching me. I find it very intriguing when people make comments about government and regulation and say in the same breath, control. That's a very sad understanding of what regulation is all about and compliance is all about too. Firstly, in terms of your question, I would say Kanishk is as far away from the mark as he could possibly be, because it's not like Twitter claimed inability. It is not like Twitter did anything for the 3 months. And what Kanishk and all the others seem to be missing is the fact that if Twitter had complied, then there is no question of somebody running from Bulandshahr or any other police station to another, because they had their immunity intact then. And secondly, if you look at the provision itself in terms of appointment of compliance and nodal and grievance officer, it very clearly sets out that there will be an opportunity for them to be heard before any action is taken. All these checks and balances are built into the system. If Twitter had this concern at any point of time, or for that matter, any social media platform, then they could have contested this provision, claiming that this violates your individual rights or fundamental rights. That's not the case here. They just refuse to comply.
So when in February, that's correct, Kanish Gaur, when in February the rules were announced, no one said anything. At the end of the deadline, Twitter turns around and says, we haven't been able to appoint officials. If you felt it was wrong or you weren't finding the right official, there should have been a public disclosure about it, which Twitter didn't do. So it seems to be, I've had some colleagues in school and college who just acted the way Twitter did. कि मेरी मर्जी नहीं करना भाई, अब आपको जो करना है कर लो. This is who I am. This is the way I am. Deal with me. Now you can't do that. You can't do that when you're working in an external geography and you have a government and its laws to comply with.
Yeah, Rahul, the rules itself said so. The Rule 7 said that if you don't comply, you will lose your immunity. So it's not like you needed a lawyer to come and interpret it for you to even know what the consequences will be. And secondly, why are we assuming government control every time we talk about regulation? There was this talk about it should be looked at from the user's perspective, particularly when you talk about grievance officer and compliance officer, etc. Isn't it really for the benefit of the users? Toxic Twitter is the title that Amnesty International's report gave to Twitter, and talked about the kind of cyberbullying and trolling and other violations, particularly against women and children, that's happening on this platform.
Sure, yeah.
So we need these protective
so this is a fact, Kanish. Very often, and I can say this in my own instance, as will so many other people, people say all kinds of really bad things, threatening death, murder, what have you. Women journalists have people threatening them with rape. Twitter there doesn't seem to mind or care very much. So it's also very selective. They're not covering themselves with glory. You tell me in 3 months, they couldn't set up a mechanism to get the right official. I then raise very serious questions about the competence of the Twitter management.
Absolutely. And everybody talks about free speech. What about the free speech of the victims?
Kanish Gaur, please.
When
Kanish
you are
Gaur.
trolling somebody, then aren't you stifling their free speech, and therefore you need to protect that too?
Kanish Gaur, please.
So let's just understand the issue is not just about Twitter. If you look at other platforms, you look at the other big tech platforms, none of them appointed these 3 officers from their own payroll. Everybody hired a lawyer from a law firm. Everybody hired a lawyer from a law firm, and all of these lawyers were made accountable, right? Now what happens in case of Twitter is the lawyer which they hired resigned, right? But today you only want to go after Twitter. You don't want to talk about other platforms. Rahul, there are platforms like Telegram, Signal, which are known for spreading terrorism, which are known for spreading violence, which are known for spreading hatred, and which are known for spreading pornography. None of your discussions talk about those platforms. None of them talk about have they appointed nodal officers in this country or not? Have they come forward and complied to the guidelines or not? They have not been spoken about. In fact, they have more number of users than Twitter. Look at Twitter. Twitter is the first medium which the government of India uses. Arvind Gupta was the CEO of MyGov, and MyGov uses Twitter so efficiently today. They have a law enforcement mechanism as well, and Twitter is being effectively used by all the government agencies, even during the pandemic. But today, we only want to go after Twitter. We don't want to talk about any other platforms which is in the country violating the norms, right? Why were we doing that?
Arvind Gupta, respond to that. The charge that there are other smaller platforms which haven't complied with the laws either, and you don't seem to care very much about that because Twitter is more in the public eye, because now the ball is reverse swinging. Earlier you were dominating Twitter, now your opponents are giving it back to you, which is why the government doesn't like it. Respond to that charge.
So I think that's number one. It's very, very, I don't think so. The government publishes a list saying these are the platforms which have lost their immunity in the safe harbor provisions. Twitter, it is automatic. You don't comply with certain rules, you automatically are no longer having the provisions. As my friend Nanpai says that it is a Napinai said that it is automatic revocation of your safe harbor. Now, the government has not chosen to go after them. I'm again repeating, it's a self-inflicted wound that Twitter has done. Second thing is, it is not really, the point being whether Telegram or any other platform have not had incidences, but they are under the safe harbor. And if they know, the government knows who to reach out to, who to tell that this is a perfectly, this is a national security issue or this is a public disorder issue. Please take out its content or provide a relevant information if required under legal provisions. They do that. Everybody does that. Twitter, right now there is no nodal officer.
So I want final words on what you think will happen next. Rahil Khurshid, this is a battle of attrition. You're saying it's not as if Twitter is deliberately fighting with the Indian government, just happens to be one of those things where things happening at the same time. How will this end? What do you think will happen next?
I don't know, quite honestly, Rahul. I think Twitter should, if it's not complying with the rules, it is an entity registered, in India. It has to comply to it has to comply to orders. But if it thinks that some of the rules that has been asked to comply are unfair or unconstitutional, even, it needs to go to court and challenge those laws. And it has the money, it has the time, it has the I'd say social capital even to fight this out constitutionally, which is what I think they should do. Of course, there is a lot of this will keep popping up. It's a public platform and there's a lot of sparring on the platform, and everything that happens on the platform gets disproportionately blown up because all the influentials are there. So it happens in full public view. I'm thinking that there's going to be some more sparks. I'm not sure, however, like whether these sparks are going to lead to an actual fire. I think, as you pointed out, Rahul, earlier, that as much as Twitter needs India, India also needs Twitter. It is a fairly crucial platform when it comes to the flow of information, when it comes to the flow of communication, when it comes to the expression of Indians, at least the ones that are on the platform. While I was there, we pivoted Twitter to like a really large service delivery ethic. And that I think is really crucial and still delivers, right? So I do hope that this is resolved in the earnest. And as I said, like if Twitter thinks that some of the rules that it's being asked to comply with aren't fair, it needs to exploit the avenues that it has constitutionally to challenge those rules, and I do hope that it can do so, not just for its own sake, but for the sake
so
of.
I'm out of time.
For the sake of.
I want to show you what happened with Google, because Google is also in the line of fire. They've told a IT parliamentary panel that its employees tend to listen to Google conversations via Google Assistant. I have a Google Assistant at home, and I'm pretty spooked about it, because it's clearly not okay to say, okay, Google, because you got somebody at Google listening in. This is something that Google themselves have accepted, admitted before an IT parliamentary panel.
There's a little Google in everyone's life. If you're online in any shape or form, there's almost zero chance that Google isn't part of your existence. You've always known somewhere that tech companies keep tabs on your life, your habits, what you watch, what you shop for, where you go, who you meet, and what you say. But Google's links in your life have just become a little more explicit. During a deposition before India's Parliamentary Standing Committee on Information Technology, headed by Congress MP Shashi Tharoor, on the need to safeguard citizens' rights, top sources tell India Today that Google representatives admitted that Google employees listen to private recordings of customer conversations via Google Assistant. Sources say Google admitted that its employees listen when users with Google Assistant on their phones and smart speakers say, "Okay, Google," to kickstart a conversation with the assistant, very much like Amazon's Alexa. Significantly, the Google team admitted that some user conversations were recorded even when users weren't activating Google Assistant. Google has said that only general conversations were recorded, never anything sensitive. Now, how Google actually differentiates is something it didn't clarify to the parliamentary panel. To sum up, admission number one, employees do listen to private recordings via Google Assistant. They listen to Google Assistant instructions, but that these recordings are of general conversations, nothing sensitive.
Get a Lyft ride to my hotel.
The admissions by Google explain why lakhs of users, right after asking Google Assistant, for instance, about hotels in a city, start getting messages on their accounts on different platforms about deals and offers, is what one member of the parliamentary panel observed. Deeming it a serious breach of user privacy, the panel's final report is expected to make recommendations to the central government on it.
I think currently, in the absence of a data privacy law, it looks very difficult, because all these things are done in the form of collecting data for precision advertisement. So in my opinion, once we have the data privacy bill in place, then I think we will be able to better regulate these companies and maybe deny certain things, or maybe force them to clarify to every user that how they are collecting your data, when they are collecting, and how they are using.
The panel firmly conveyed to representatives from Google and other tech giants, including Facebook, that they need to plug loopholes urgently in their existing data protection and privacy policy mechanism and install stringent safeguards.
The government can mandate the service providers like Google to stop hearing the conversations of the users who are using Google Assistant in India. Why? Because Google is an intermediary under Section 21W of the Information Technology Act 2000. It's mandated to exercise due diligence.
Social media platforms that have challenged India's new IT rules have found Indian politicians uniting across party lines to direct Facebook, Google and others to comply with the country's laws. The absence of a political divide has led to extensive grueling of teams from these tech giants. With Rahul Srivastav in Delhi, Bureau Report, India Today.
This is where we slip into a quick break. I'll have more for you in part B when we come back on the other side. You're watching the Newstrack.